Recording. Yeah, so today, guys, we'll sort of go in and sort of look around a little bit of sort of psychology, sort of mindset when we're sort of playing
Right.
tennis. So for myself, there's sort of like to start with, there's almost like two sort of people fall into sort of two camps quite often when they're sort of playing. You've got the person who's the more learning orientated person, and the other person is more the sort of competition sort of oriented person. And for me, like it's about both are great, but it's about making sure you've got enough of both to sort of really sort of progress when you're sort of playing. So to start with, like the learning sort of orientated person, what we often sort of find with them is they pick up the skills quicker. So whatever we're talking about, whether on like the forehand, the serve, the backhand, like in terms of the technique, they're much better at sort of picking it up faster. But what we often sort of find with them, it's their awareness is all about themselves. So what they're doing with process,
Yeah.
but they're not so much aware of the point and how it's playing out and where the shot's going. Quite often, if I was working with someone like that, I'd say, "Where did your last shot go?" And you'd get, "I don't know." But if you ask them, what did you get your finish on your forehand or anything else like that, they would have a good awareness around that. So the benefit of this is obviously in terms of learning the technique, they're going to get there faster because that's what their focus is on. So they develop sort of good sort of sound ground strokes, sort of volleys, which allows them to play the game well. But when they're actually in point process, like they don't sort of understand the game so much, which is like the downside. If you flip that to sort of the competitive person, they're a lot more aware of where their shots are going, what effect it has on their opponents, what sort of options are to play in terms of like the tactical sense. But because they're sort of immersed on that aspect of the game, they then sort of they forget to do the right swings, or they get sort of drawn back a little bit because they know the importance of getting a shot to a certain place. So they play within their technique to sort of get it there, which then means, yes, they get the ball where it wants to go, but they're not developing their technique, so they can't actually play shots consistently to a better level. So these are the sort of two common ones that we sort of do come across. And for me, it's for the person to understand the other side of it. So for the person who's sort of the learning orientated person, obviously it's great to be learning, but it's about understanding cause and effect. So like whatever we're doing, what's the effect? Rather than like, this is feeling good today and it's going past the baseline, or it's dropping really short and it's easy for the person to sort of pick up. So it's about understanding the effects in the match play sense and sort of bringing that aspect and that sort of learning to it. Whereas on the other side, it's about, yes, you can sort of manipulate the ball sort of a little bit better, but to be able to move forwards and move up, like you get like stuck with like a ceiling with like technique, and it's like they're reluctant to sort of do the skills sort of above that can make them move further, move more forwards, because they're aware of when they make a mistake, they're a lot more aware of it. And it's sort of it's like that emotional sort of part of it, like you don't want to make mistakes and it sort of hurts a bit more, so they're reluctant to sort of make the change. But for them, it's learning the importance of progression and sort of development. So part of it with it, the competition sort of person is understanding to when you're playing, sometimes you can play to develop and get better rather than just be about the points. The other thing I suppose we sort of find sort of club level as well is that, or not so much like as much the competitive side of like winning the points, it's that bit of letting the other person down. So like when they're trying something and making mistakes, they're like, oh, I've let them down, and it's like, I can get it in with a simpler way. So it's that sort of, they're kind of aware of the outside more rather than sort of getting the sort of the process in place. And what I'd sort of say to the people with that sort of competitive mindset is sometimes play with the purpose to get better and bring the sort of awareness to yourself. And what you do is it's all about repetitions with technique and creating habits. And you create a habit, it's almost sort of like you need X number to start turning it into a habit. So let's say it's like 1,000 reps to make a habit. Now, for the person who's process orientated, learning orientated, they'd probably get their 1,000 within 12,000, 1,200 turns, whereas the person who's competitive, they might have to take like 3,000, 4,000 balls, because there's lots of opportunities they can to practice the technique, but they get stuck in the sort of the emotional part of that, the points or the letting people down, so they don't take up the option. So it's really important to do that, to get the sort of reps in. And what you start to do is, when you get the reps in, you start to sort of build confidence, and confidence, as we know, is extremely, extremely important. And like the analogy that I use for confidence is, it's almost like you've got, when you're learning a new skill, you've got like this sort of bank here, and it's got no coins in whatsoever. So you get a few in to start with when you're doing it, but if you make a mistake, it's kind of like, it doesn't feel very full, and it's like not very safe. So you move away from it straight away. Whereas when you've got like a bank full of coins, like if you miss one, you've only lost one of many, and you've known that you can do it, so you don't doubt yourself. Because it's like just one mistake. It's not something like, oh, it's all gone wrong. It's just, well, it's just one. I know that I can do it because I've done it all these times before. It's just a mistake. But until you've built up the bank, you don't have that sort of confidence to do it. So it's easy to sort of draw back. And this is where the learner understands the importance of keep putting coins in the bank consistently, whereas the competitor sort of mindset just goes, oh, it's not working. That little voice in the head goes, well, I know I can do it the other way. And then we revert back to type, and then we're not progressing. So for me, those are like the two sort of ones sort of explained a little bit there. Within the sort of the learning sort of mindset in terms of sort of learning, we've got, has anyone heard of the sort of author Carol Dweck? Sort of works around sort of mindset. So what you have with that is, you've got like sort of two parts. You've got the sort of the growth mindset, and you've got the fixed mindset, and it's all to do with sort of how people perceive themselves and what they can do. So a fixed mindset sort of, it's like you feel that you've got a limit, that you can't go any further. Whereas growth, what that person sort of believes is like, I can always keep getting better. And like part of the sort of psychology is around it as well, which we do as sort of coaches, is like we try and sort of instill growth mindset. Because obviously the person sort of believing they can get better will, over time, obviously keep doing it, keep doing it. So the study that they sort of did, which sort of like proved this, they had like sort of, you know, sort of two sample size sort of groups, and they were sort of doing sort of questions with maths. And what they did to start with, the first test they did it so they deliberately knew that it was well within everyone's capability. So it was easy to do. And what they did is they just changed how they praised one group to the other group. So the first group, what they did was they praised like, oh, you're really talented. Like you're obviously amazing at maths, and sort of, it's like it's skills they can't control. So it's just that sort of that feeling of like, I can do it because I'm a talented person. So in like sort of tennis terms, it's almost like, oh, you're such a natural tennis player, that sort of type of analogy. Whereas the other group, they sort of praised them on hard work. So when sort of, oh, you know, you must have worked really hard to sort of get to these sort of solutions, these problems, like, and like by hard work, it's something that they can control. And then what they did next was the next time they gave them the test, they deliberately gave a harder test, so ones that they weren't going to be able to sort of solve, or at a push it was going to be difficult for them to solve. And at this point, because the first time, like, all the results were quite similar, the second time the results were significantly higher for the group that were called hard workers compared to talented. So what happens here is, it's all to do with sort of self-preservation, self-worth, self-ego. As a talented person, if I try my best and fail, I'm suddenly not a talented person because I failed. And then my ego is attached to me being sort of talented, or a natural tennis player, or whatever it may be sort of to them. So what happens is they then essentially sort of like, oh, I didn't try my best. I could have done it if I wanted to, which is that preserving sort of ego sort of sense. Whereas the hard worker, they can get it wrong, but they've still proved that they're a hard worker. So like, and like, you can still be praised for hard work, even if you don't do well in a test. But if you worked hard, you're still preserving your sort of ego in that sense. So when we sort of play tennis, it's for us to sort of recognise, are we falling into one of these sort of camps? Are we giving ourselves like a fixed mindset of, oh, I'm only up to a certain ability, I can't do anything more? Or are you sort of, or can you shift yourselves to that sort of, I can get better if I work hard. I sort of, there's a few things that we're going to talk about which kind of like build this sort of up. But if you kind of have that sort of mindset, you will continue to get better, because you're understanding that I can't get it all straight away, but I will keep working on it. I'll keep working on it. If I do the right things, I will get better. So just by like changing people's sort of mindset to that is extremely sort of powerful in terms of sort of like liberating sort of someone when they're playing, but it also sort of gives them that self-worth and understanding that they're doing the right thing. Because if you feel you're doing the right thing, you continue doing the right thing. So sort of some of the aspects that we sort of got, so obviously we talked about sort of hard work, then we've got sort of concentration, sort of just maintaining your concentration as you're playing, because it's quite easy to slip our concentration as we're doing it. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. We've got focus and awareness. So these are sort of two different sort of like aspects of our sort of our ability to sort of put our mind in certain sort of positions. So a way of sort of describing the difference would be focus. If you imagine I had a laser pen sort of pointed at a wall, you'd obviously get a very sort of fine point. So I'm very focused on something at that moment in time. So like learning could be wherever I get my position with the racket, wherever I get my finish, how I set my feet up. I'm very focused on something specific that myself or Rupert have sort of given, and you're able to sort of keep doing it. And then like awareness is a much sort of broader sort of spectrum. So when we're sort of playing, let's say we've done some focus on keeping our sort of shape, our awareness, we're now playing points, we're understanding points, but we're aware if we don't do something. So it's kind of like a little red flag that almost pops up, like as you're sort of doing it, I should be doing this, but like you just do one, your racket drops straight back, it goes back to tight. It's suddenly like we're not focused on doing it, but we're suddenly aware that we missed it. And if we're aware that we missed it, then we can then like put a little bit more focus back on sort of keeping it going. So those sort of two aspects are sort of very important in sort of developing. So one, like the focus, knowing the right thing that we will tell you to do, and then just obviously focusing on it and keeping to it and having that learning mindset, and then building it out to more open play. So like awareness is probably the better one as you're playing doubles with each other, guys. Like if you know what you're supposed to be doing, obviously you're focused, you're playing the points, but you're aware if you're what you know should be happening is then slipping, and then you can obviously, with awareness, you've got choice, and with choice you can make change. What's the other one? This one's probably relates a little bit more sort of junior players, just like the effort that they put in, just obviously making sure it's a very simple sort of equation. Obviously, the harder I work and like more I put in, the more I get out. So when I was working in sort of performance sort of quite a few years ago, like the goal was when they have their hour with you, if they are maxing out their sort of physical effort and mental effort, they are going to be getting the most from that sort of session. So it's really getting them to understand what maxing out is and sort of getting there, and then getting them to replicate that as much as possible, and sort of creating their own sort of standards around it. But for us, it's more about like the mental side of understanding the different things and implementing and sort of going through with it. Focus, awareness, concentration. So that's sort of around our learning sort of mindset and understanding those sort of areas. With the sort of the competition sort of mindset. So sort of going back to that one quickly again before we go into a few different ones around it. Like this person is often sort of very aware of where the ball's going. They understand the effect of what they're doing to the ball and what they're trying to get the effect of our opponent, and they're reading the game sort of quite well. But then like with the sort of competitive sort of mindset as well, then what we sort of try to sort of do is really sort of instill, again, it's little bits as like the learning side, obviously where we sort of develop it there, but then the competition is how they then replicate in matches. So these sort of things that I sort of would try and install sort of, again, like sort of a little bit more performance sort of related here, but the importance of never giving up. And to be fair, you could even sort of see that in club doubles as well. Like if someone's 5-1 down, they just I just hit a couple, like just have a little swing and see what happens. But obviously, sort of never giving up is sort of very important. Obviously, you see that with like the top pros like Nadal and Federer. You never know when they're out, because they'll never give up until the last point's been played. I used to love this one in junior ones, and it's like chase every ball. So what this does is it instills that mindset of I'm going straight away. But what I've sort of noticed sort of relates more for sort of club doubles players is if anyone's done cardio tennis before with us or seen it going on, there's obviously a lot of running around after shots. And what we often find is people that have done that is when they're playing, like normally it's like, oh, I can get that shot. Because when you prove that you can, you do. But if you've got that sort of switch in the brain that goes, looks at the ball and goes, nah, you're not going to go after it. Whereas if you've got that sort of switch in the brain that's sort of almost like a dog with a ball, it's like you're always going to get there. Like you're going to get more shots than with the mindset of sort of that switches off to slightly more difficult ones. We've got sort of the competition sort of bit as well. We've got mistake management and emotional control, which I think sort of is quite important. So mistake management is sort of to do when we're playing, like how do we respond to mistakes? Different sort of people will sort of deal it in different ways. You'll see sort of some people will maybe lose their temper when they're playing, probably a little bit less in sort of club doubles, the people that we're playing with. But what you sort of see is more common is people will just sort of almost lower a tone of sort of like body energy, and they sort of just regress a little bit, and then they're not as involved and alert as they sort of get a little bit depleted when they play. Whereas like if you can be robust to mistakes, it's going to allow you to sort of maintain your personal level a lot more. So it's understanding that that's an important sort of part of it. We'll touch a little bit more on like what we can do as well with it. I sort of got obviously emotional control, which is often related around like the sort of mistakes, but just as much with emotional control, it's dealing with points of play. Like whoever sort of got to sort of like set point or something like that, and suddenly just got a little bit more nervous just because of the point. That again, that is actually around emotional control. So it's about controlling our emotions to play what we can do as we're sort of playing it. And I just pointed out. So like again, this last sort of one is again, it's around sort of, it's like something I installed. It's like a more sort of performance mindset, but it's actually a great one across the board. Never make the same mistake twice. So if in one point you hit the net, do not do that on the next point. So that's that sort of awareness when you're playing. Do not make the same mistake twice, because if you keep making the same mistake, it shows that you haven't picked up the awareness to make a change. And the people who get better at this is what they do is they have that sort of mentality during the point as well. So if I'm rallying cross court with Rupert, I know that the height over the net should be, let's say, like X over the net. If I hit one that was just that over the net, yes, I'm still in the point. But if I haven't recognised that and I try and do the same thing again and it's in the net, I've lost the point. So if I've dropped one like a little bit lower than what I think it should be, on the next one I'm going to readjust to where I want it to be. So it's a little bit sort of higher level, but it's that same mentality. Do not make the same mistake twice. So often we only analyse the very last shot because that's the point ended and it's done, isn't it? And it's easier to analyse between points what's going on. But if we can sort of be aware when we're sort of playing, like we know what we're trying to do. So that comes back to our tactical lesson. If we know what we're trying to do and it's not doing that, then it's sort of, well, on the next one, make sure it's sort of a lot closer to what we want it to do. Any questions so far? I'm kind of firing a lot at you at the moment, guys. I can see a lot of scribbling of notes.
I think it's that thing about being sometimes too tentative, which go back, or too safe because you're worried about making a mistake. That might go back to being too concerned about it being a competition as opposed to just learning, as you said.
So you could probably, from how I described it, see yourself falling into that more competitive mindset in the outcome and everything else there, Jill, can't you?
Yeah.
Jill, that's a really good point. I hope I'm not crackly or cutting out. Tell me if I am, and I'll shut up. It's a really good point you made there, but not only because of the competitive side, but also if you're playing a doubles, like Ben said, if you don't want to let your partner down.
Well, exactly, it's the letting down, which is quite as well.
So we go for the more tentative option. The most common one I see, and I'm sure Ben will agree, is second serves. Second serves, the amount of times, and it's the one thing I hate to see. And I have been guilty of it in recent years. Because if you do one or two double faults, or maybe your break point down or set point down. Even if it's just a friendly doubles or you're playing singles, no one wants to lose their service game. No one wants to lose a service point. You don't want to lose the point, and you don't want to double fault. So especially coming off the back of a few double faults, your mind is overpowering you, and it just says, just get it in, just get it in. But actually, in trying to do that by being tentative and just sort of popping it over, 9 times out of 10, what you'll realise is you actually miss it anyway. You either hit it long or you hit the net. And the 1-2 times out of 10 that it does go in, where you've completely backed off, they're going to win the point anyway. So when you look at it like that, when you take yourself out of the situation and look at it from an outside point of view, it's always good, because when you see other people do that, it's a good time to sort of reflect and go, wow, that's normally me. And so I think, how does that look? They didn't get it in. And the last time I saw them get it in like that, actually, it got pelted back at them anyway. So, but when you're in that moment, it's so hard. And like I say, I'm guilty. I've been guilty of backing off my second serves. In certain situations at certain scorelines, especially when I'm playing against Ben, and I really don't like losing against Ben.
It happens.
But it's an interesting one, and I think the serve, it happens a lot on the second serve, and there's no easy fix for that. But obviously, one solution is then this sort of mindset idea then links back into your technical play and your consistency, and it's just, improve the consistency of the second serve, and then actually you won't have that problem, because if you're not missing your second serves very often, then you're not even going to consider backing off it. See what I mean? So if you look at the best players, their second serves are super consistent. They're hitting 85-90% second serves in. So then that's sort of cancels out that cycle before it's even had a chance to begin. It's like cause and effect, and the cause of you backing off the serve is the fact that maybe the serves aren't as consistent as they could be. But that's only one example. I know it happens later on in rallies. Well, we have chances to finish. I think like Brian or Giles, someone brought it up the other week, finishing short balls, same thing. They'll get there, they'll set up, perfect ball, really ideal ball, and then they'll just sort of back off it and actually miss the shot. So it's incredible how often it happens, really.
One of probably one of my best bits of coaching I can remember, and it was about 8-9 years ago, because I remember how profound the effect was. I was doing a lesson, this was when I was at Letchworth, on a one-handed backhand. I knew the guy could hit it, but he just reluctantly wouldn't hit it, or he'd hit a couple and then he'd make a mistake, then he'd revert back. And for myself, it was like, I knew that it was pretty much there. It just needed confidence. So the question I asked him was like, can you do it 10 times in a row? Or how confident would you be that you could do 10 times in a row? And it was like, if it makes a mistake, it doesn't matter. They're like, but just commit to it. It was like, I can do that. He did 10 in a row. And I sort of said, like, what do you value more? The ability to use this backhand more often, or to sort of win a few more points short term? It was like, I value the importance of getting better. And I was like, if that is what you actually value more, then that is what you've got to do. And then from that lesson, it kicked on, and it improved, and we didn't really sort of look back from that, because what it did is like you shift in yourself what you value more. And like for the competitive person, or the person who's more self-aware, they value that more than the learning. So what happens when it's at that crunch time, they go to what they're going to gravitate to, what they value more, and a lot of it's subconscious, like subconsciously what they value more. Whereas if you can consciously recognize it and like, I value improvement more, when you put yourself in that position, you're then going to commit to it, knowing that even if I miss, again, goes that learning mindset, even if I miss, I did the right thing. Because you can't berate yourself for doing the right thing.
I think it probably, if you have that mindset, it makes you experiment more as opposed to sort of stick to what.
Yeah, it opens you up. You're a little bit more brave to do things.
Yeah.
And then the more you do it, the more confidence you have it, and then it kind of turns into like an upward spiral effect. So the next thing I've sort of got is sort of mistake sort of analysis. So when we make a mistake, it's easy suddenly to sort of question our technique, go backwards with it, and revert to type like we've been talking about before. But like this little tool is very powerful in terms of sort of like helping you recognize why the mistake was caused. So like it's just 2 questions you ask yourself each time. When you made the mistake, was I in the right place? So did I have the right contact point? If the answer is no, I wasn't in the right place, the technique's not the fault. You can't fault the technique. So you can then, as you come back, you have the same situation again. You're in the right place. You have the belief in the technique, so you execute it more. And the second one is, so I was in the right place. Did I make the right decision? So if I had a ball where I'm behind the baseline, I'm trying to smack a big winner, that is not the right time to do that. And if I've made a mistake on it, clearly it was the decision that was the mistake. So if you're playing and you're in the right place and you're making the right decisions, then you're doing the right thing. So you can then sort of value that. And what might come up is, okay, so like some of us we've talked about in the last sort of weeks, Rupert, Ben, like in this situation, I commonly make a mistake. And it could be that you're in the right place, trying the right thing, and then it is about the technique sort of being developed. But if you're doing the right thing in the right place, trying the right swing, you can't fault yourself for that. And we're not robots. There's still gonna be some errors that sort of come in doing that. But if we know we're on and that's the key thing, if we know we're on the right tracks, it gives us confidence to carry on forwards on the right path. Whereas if we're suddenly like, we're making mistakes and we're thinking it's about, oh, my follow through's gone all, what's happening here? But the reality was the ball was in the wrong place. Doesn't matter about the swing, and we're getting our brain going in the wrong place. So like those 2 questions I find sort of very, very sort of powerful as it's sort of coming through. Next one sort of got sort of this links a little bit sort of before about the learning sort of mindset, is like deliberate practice. So when you guys are sort of with us in a lesson or we're trying something, if you just make sure that we are really sort of focused on the right task and we're maintaining those things, because deliberate practice makes habits, and habits make us much more effective in everything that we do. Another sort of note I've sort of got here is performance. So how we play is the potential of what we've got minus interference. Okay, so I'll just say that again. So our performance equals our potential minus our interference. So essentially our potential is us playing at our best, and what's stopping us playing at our best. So for me, there's two factors. You've got external influence and internal influence. So like external could be a bad bounce. It could be a bird or something runs across like the back of the court that distracts us as we're playing. Our opponent is just doing something that's just taken our attention away, and it's affecting our sort of it's interference. So obviously our performance is dropping. Now we can't control external, but we can then sort of control like how it affects us sort of like internally. So how well are we sort of dealing with these different things? Like, and it's a lot to do with it. It's everything we spoke about before, in terms of like how we see things, how we try to sort of focus on whatever it may be. And if we can control the internal battle that, you know, it is sometimes a battle that we have, and we can minimize as many things as possible by like understanding, rationalizing, sort of understanding our values and aligning our values in the right place, it's going to allow us to play closer to our potential a lot more. Whereas if I'm always one you sort of see sort of a lot is where like emotions will get sort of out of control and someone becomes really tight, and when they're tight they can't move and flow through the shot so much, so it's big interference. Obviously my performance at the end of it is going to be sort of dramatically affected as it's sort of coming through. So it's a huge part of tennis is up here, because a lot of us, like very few people will have their potential and play close to their potential the whole time, and it's all to do with like our own sort of thoughts that's limiting us in what we can do. So if we can take away those limitations, then it's going to allow us to sort of execute more. So what do you think happens to sort of people when they're sort of playing between points? Is they've got a lot of sort of thought processes going on. These thoughts are going to like sort of distract us, like what if this happens, or oh, I should have done that on the last point, I should have finished the point, and we're thinking about that. Whenever our thoughts are in the past or the future, it's interference to ourselves. So we play our best when we stay in the present when we're playing. And how we can do that, we got different ways we can do it. Obviously, as we're like mid-point, it's easy to stay in sort of focus as we're playing. Often you'll find where people get suddenly their thoughts come in is where like a slow one comes towards us, and we've got time to think. And then we've got time to think, we then get in our heads and sort of go, oh, I should put it away, or because suddenly I'm thinking what's going to happen sort of next, rather than like, this is what I'm doing, and just focus on that as we're playing.
I think just on that, guys, as important as that is in the rally, like Ben was just saying, that also applies between points, and that's something that massively affects us. You know, if we've like got a break point or a game point or a set point, we start thinking, you know, or we go 4-love up. Like I've lost sets from 5-love down before, 5-love up, but I've also won sets from being like 5-2 down, you know, and love 40. They've had like 3 break points, 3 set points in that game, and you turn it around. But the hard thing is to stay in the moment, you know, like Ben said, stay in the moment and really, I know it's a cliche, but take it 1 point at a time. You know, really focus on what you're doing there and then, because at the end of the day, if you don't get that bit right, there will be no, you know, next part. But that is the one thing about the scoring system in tennis. Obviously, you're not against a clock. You know, it's not like a football match where if you're 5-0 down with 10 minutes to go, it's not really going to happen for you. Like we said, you can be 2 sets to love down in a Grand Slam, you know, best of 5 set, or you can be 1 set and 5-love down, can't you? And you can still come back and win that match. Because before each service game, before each point, you're in the same situation as the other player. And what's happened, if you can forget about it, doesn't really matter, you know, in that moment. So it does give you the opportunity for people that can master what Ben's talking about now. It does give you the opportunity to sort of use it to your advantage, the scoring system. But if you're someone who can't block or struggles to block out what's just happened and struggles to stop thinking about what might be, then it can work against you. Because you can sort of think, oh, I'm so close, or oh, I've got no chance, you know, so you start playing differently. And even at the pro level.
I'll quickly catch that there for you. That's like very good. Like if the challenge is catch yourself when you're having these thoughts. If you can catch yourself having them rather than entertain them, that is the art of it. Like, because everyone, even with the most perfect will intended, like thoughts come up. We can't stop thoughts, but what we can do is be aware of thoughts, catch thoughts, and then know how to sort of go back into it. And it's finding ways to sort of keep us like in the present and like clear our head. So one thing you'll see like pros do when they come to serve, they've got a routine that they go through. So it's going through a routine. One thing that I often would have done would like I sort of play with my sort of fingers as I'm sort of playing. So if I'm putting my focus here and like this, the actual kinesthetic feel of what it's like in my hand, like that's me putting focus there and not elsewhere. It could be sort of playing with a tennis ball in your hand. One you sort of see a lot is like just concentrate on your breathing. Especially if you're getting a little bit tense, what happens is we start breathing from our chest and we start breathing a little bit shorter and shallower like that. And then what actually happens is the breathing because of, like, of that, our breathing kicks in our central nervous system, which actually then makes our body more tense as well. So if it's a great way of sort of getting yourself back in is just like sort of breathing through your nose into your tummy, and sort of, and at a slower sort of speed. And you can almost count it, sort of like count 1, 2, 3, 4 in, 1, 2, 3, 4 out, and just do like a couple of those, and that just sort of controls. Because if I'm concentrating on the count of my breath and the feel of the air coming into my nose, controlling into the right area, these are all things that's not allowing me to go elsewhere. But by breathing as well, what that's doing is it's controlling the central nervous system. So if I'm not controlling my breathing, it's then going to my body will then kick in and have an effect as well. So that's a very sort of powerful sort of tool to sort of go with.
The other one, it can be as simple as just walking to the back of the court. Just walking to the back of the court. You'll see pro players doing it, just fiddling with their strings, looking down at the racket, get back in the zone, and then bang, and you see players like Djokovic. I mean, Djokovic can throw a racket, break a racket, but within 20 seconds, he's back at the baseline, his heart rate's down, his breathing sorted, and he's focused on that next point. And you wouldn't even know, if you just turned on the TV, you would not know what he'd just done. And like Ben said, with the thoughts coming to your head, you can't stop those thoughts coming to your head, because it's instantaneous. It's a reaction, isn't it? But you can sort of suppress them and control them and try and use them in the right way. We're not advocating you guys, none of you throw your racket at the ground, right? You don't have as much at stake, I'd like to think, than Novak does in the final of Grand Slam. It's serious tennis at Ellis Oak, but it's not that serious. But you can see, you've got to be able to manage it in a way that works for you. But like I say, sometimes it can just, if you lose a couple of points, momentum's a massive thing in tennis, and if you can break that as well, that will really help with your head. So just walk into the back of the court, just fiddling with your racket for a sec or whatever, just walk it off, take 10 seconds, and then focus on the next point, really. But even at the pro level, you see this, like I said, with Djokovic, he does that really well. Sort of famously, Federer at the other end of the scale has what we refer to as choked a lot of times in big matches, where he gets match points, situations to finish the set or finish the match, and record of losing a lot of match points. He'll choke, that's obviously a mental thing. I mean, he's won 20 Grand Slams. You can't say he hasn't been in that position before. But even in recent years, I think it was the French a couple of years ago. I can't remember where, it might be in Wimbledon, but he had like 2 or 3 match points, and he lost, ended up losing.
That was Wimbledon against.
So if it affects him, you can see how it will affect us. Us mere mortals. So
yeah.
One thing I'll sort of just add, coming back to like things we talked about before, like with concentration. Concentration has got a knack of wavering off to different places. How it's best described, people who know how to concentrate the best, it's not that they have the ability to concentrate the longest, is they have the quickest ability to be aware when their concentration's gone. So as they're sort of doing it, if it suddenly drifts off, they then it doesn't take them like 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5, 10 minutes before they go, oh yeah, it's gone. It's like the best people who concentrate are able to sort of recognize it quicker and then reconcentrate again. So again, it's that sort of that awareness effect as we're sort of playing, sort of going through.
Ben, Rupert.
Yep.
I just one piece of, I was just going to ask you for some advice in one respect. I know that, and to give you put it into context, when our Monday sessions, and we're practicing, and I like to think I can do some reasonable shots then. But as soon as towards the end of the session, we start playing competitive points.
Yeah.
I notice, and that's just an example, but on a Tuesday evening or whatever it is, as soon as the match starts, particularly when I'm receiving, if I'm serving, well, that one's probably do a double fault, but I feel more in control of the situation. But but that first 3 or 4 points in a doubles, when you're receiving serve, the number of times I've either hit it in the net or probably more often hit it straight to the person at the net.
Yeah.
It's that sort of preparation, that initial time when you tense up. And I wondered if there are any drills that one can do, mental drills, particularly when one's receiving it. There's a kind of barrier that I have when I'm receiving serve, especially in the beginning of a match. I just think, I know I'm going to make a mistake. Once it gets started,
Yeah.
perhaps I get better. But it's actually quite important, because if you hit the first 2 or 3 returns out or into the net or straight to the net player, and you're 1-0 down or two games down, it's such a bad start. And I just wondered if there's any advice on that.
For myself, first one, I think, because obviously we spoke about the return of serve anyway, sort of before, Brian, like partly it's probably something to do like the technical aspect of it.
Yeah.
Like you do say, it happens too often anyway, even though you know the right thing. Second one, sort of be careful of is like the phrase, if you think that you can or you think that you can't, you're probably right. So if you're going on and you already sort of in your mind thinking that, oh, it's the first one, this is the one that I takes a bit, I'm going to go up the line or miss it. The reason why that phrase works is if you're subconsciously priming yourself with, I'm going to do this, like the brain doesn't really, or you consciously think it, the subconscious will just understand what it's been told, and all it will do is what it can to actually prove you right. So if you're sort of going, I'm going to get it cross court, or well, I'm probably going to hit it up the line, if you're thinking I'm going to hit it up the line, the only way you're going to prove yourself right, Brian, is by hitting it up the line.
Yeah.
So it's that sort of, a little bit of that is like, well, I think firstly for you, it's a little bit technical anyway. But then the second thing is then when the technique is in place, we got the shorter take back to take it on. Yeah. Is to have that, if we have that sort of mindset of, I am and I will.
Yeah.
Yep, Stuart.
When you talk about distraction, particularly on return of serve, it's being too aware of that net player. It doesn't happen to be in singles, but in doubles, if that net player is there somehow, that's a distraction. That's the sort of ferocity of that net player. And it's trying to sort of take that out of your mind and do the shot that you want to do, I suppose.
Well, we talked about obviously like the importance of the net players moving. So like if you are playing a static net player, or actually for yourself, Jill, is this for someone who is static as well affects you, or if you're playing someone who you know that moves?
Oh, probably someone that I know is going to be very good and can move, yes.
So obviously that's what they're trying to do to you, and that's obviously the effects that they're sort of creating.
It is, yes, it is. Thinking that I can't just do a free swing because there's someone there. It's that kind of block in your mind.
It's not necessarily so much a block. It's the effect. Like what they're doing is they are creating uncertainty for you.
Yeah.
Like if you're playing a static net player who doesn't move and not going to intercept much, they're not creating that uncertainty. By them moving, it is creating uncertainty. So what that is then sort of demanding of you is it's a high sort of skill ability to be aware of being able to either go cross court or up the line, having choice that you might have to make very late before you hit the ball. So it's a harder skill, and that's why we encourage the net players to move, to it's going to make you make mistakes, isn't it? Just because you're, where are they going to go? Like, what am I going to do? But what I'd sort of probably sort of suggest to sort of like help for now is, even if you know they're moving, like in your head, like I'm hitting my standard shot. I think we talked about it the other week. I'm going to plan a cross court each time, and you will only change it if you see them moving before you hit the ball.
Right.
Because if you're playing the guessing game all the way towards you and you're not sure what's going on, it's like our consciousness, our clear sort of thought patterns is kind of going everywhere, and then we get indecisive, we get a bit nervous, we get a bit panicked because we're not sure what we're doing, and then we're making mistakes. So what I do against those people is like, I've got my plan A, but I know that I can switch to plan B, which is up the line, if they make too much of a movement cross court too early.
Okay. Yeah.
I think just on that, both Brian and Jill, what you said, they're both very valid points and very real problems that I think is, it's not just you that have those issues when returning the first few points of serves, or going from like a lesson into then point play and getting that change. But the first question I'd ask is obviously, how often do you practice the isolated skill of returning a serve compared to how much you play down the middle of the court and volleys and things? So it really comes back to that. And if you think about that, a scarily small amount. I know, you know, and it's the same for me. It's my returning at the level that I play. If I was to play Ben, my returning is definitely the weakest part of my game. It's something that I need to work. I want to work on. I need to work on, and I have worked on. But I think a big part of that, and I think a big part of the reason it's a weaker part of a lot of people's games, is you don't practice that isolated skill of, right, twice a week, I'll go down and for half an hour have someone just serve balls at me, different pace, different spin, in the wind, whatever. No excuses. No, it was windy. Just get on and improve it. So it comes back to that point that if you improve that skill, then obviously it's like the second serve. Like we said, if you can improve the consistency there, the issue of, should I back off? It won't even come into the picture, because it won't even come into your head at all, because you have no need to think like that. And I think, you can't guarantee it, but I think that will have, it might not have a massive effect, but it will definitely have a positive effect on the return of serve in that situation. But I think this comes back to just practice on the whole, so that when you are practicing or when you are playing, even if you're just doing a basket of serves, on your own, practice with a goal, and just always tell yourself you're playing a match. Because remember, you're practicing to do it in a match, aren't you? The only reason we really practice our skills is to get better at them, to be able to do them in a match. You do get some people who just want to improve their tennis just for to play socially or with their kids or whatever. But all of you guys play some competitive tennis of some sort, even if it's just a fixed four or just at the end of a lesson. But practice with the mindset that you're playing a match, so practice each serve, really focus on each serve, not only with the technique, and what you're trying to do with your technique and things, but where you're aiming and your mindset. So take the time between each serve that you would if you were playing a match, maybe put a routine in there. And that's the same when you're returning serve and things. Don't just sort of think, I'll go and return serve. I'll definitely practice that now, and then go down and sort of stand there in a sort of half ready position and go through the motions, because then again, it probably won't improve. If you really commit to, right, I'm going to improve my return by practicing some really good quality returns, I think that's probably the first step, and I think that will really, really help. It's something you all know what to do. We've done a couple of weeks on it here. It's something Ben and I work on quite a lot with you guys, serve and return. But it is a skill that when you put it into a doubles, especially, you don't get that many. It's hard to get rhythm, because when you're playing doubles, there's not as much. Obviously, singles, it's not right. I serve, I return. I serve, I return. There's a lot more standing around, especially if you're playing with players who might be slightly weaker than you. So it's hard to get that rhythm when you play. So you can really work on that, away from those competitive situations. But yeah, again, there's no right or wrong answer. I think just quickly, the other thing, Jill, you were saying about the net player moving. I think Ben's probably touched on it. It's a term or a philosophy that is one of the most basic ones, but it's only control. You can only control the controllables. Don't try and control everything. So the net player moving, you can't stop them. They start doing the can if they wanted to, right? And you can't control that. So don't try and, don't even let it really come into your head. The only time, obviously, you then want to really think about what they're doing is if they keep going across. That's when you can think, okay, I know what they're going to do. I'll go down the line. But in terms of second guessing them and letting that affect your decision making and your headspace, then try and just focus on what you can do in that moment. But it's not. I mean, none of this is easy to implement. It's not something that you can just you can do overnight. But I think if you just practice it, it will get better.
I mean, we've talked about obviously like quite a lot of things, and obviously you'll get the video so you can sort of really see a lot of stuff we talked about.
Yeah.
We sort of came back to like what we're sort of talking about this at the beginning. It's like if we understanding like what we value more and not have like inner conflict sort of with it, like it's easy to sort of get drawn towards like not letting people down. But if you truly think that, you know, I want to get better, and you stick to those sort of key processes and like understand a few like the philosophies around it, you will improve. One of the things where like someone's a little bit stronger in a group and they try and sort of play down, is as I remind them that you're actually helping the other person by challenging them more, sometimes by playing like better shots. That's only going to help them as well, and it's helping you, because like you're playing better shots more often and they're having to learn to deal with better shots, which is helping them improve. So like sometimes we can get drawn into the other person a little bit sort of too much. From, I mean, let's say from my perspective, if I played on like a club night, like if I played full out, it's not going to be particularly fair on them, but I could actually choose to target a particular skill that I want to work on and really try and sort of practice that sort of skill, which then levels the playing field a little bit more, but it's going to challenge me to actually do what I need to sort of do with it. But generally speaking, you're not going to have like this huge mismatch of like potential versus potential sort of coming with the people that we're playing. Yeah, so like, I mean, for you guys, obviously we've sort of covered a couple of questions already, but anything else sort of around it that you sort of, or any sort of situation or something that's come up from what we've talked about that you want us to delve into a little bit more?
No, that's great.
Yeah, I think it's one of those areas we don't want to overcomplicate, because there's a lot of things you can go off into. It's such a complex thing, isn't it? Psychology and sports psychology and things. But those main principles we sort of spoke about tonight are really, really the ones you want to focus on. It's one of those things where you want to just take an idea away and make it your own and really work on it and hopefully see the benefits.
Well, I think by saying what do you value more is pretty good, actually. You just want to, rather than worrying about letting people down or making mistakes or whatever. Yeah.
And also you'll get better quicker, so you won't then sort of be letting them down if you're getting to that point as well. And you'll enjoy the game more because you're playing more shots that sort of satisfies you as you're playing.
Yeah. Great.
That's very good, thank you. It's like,
very good, yeah.
Never really heard people talk about sort of the psychology of tennis before, so it's quite a new subject, and it's
because you're the Iceman, Mark. You've got nerves of steel. You're the Iceman. no need to.
Exactly, but it's just things that you can just key into, and what the like being in the present on every and concentration and things like this is like at the end of the day, you're there to enjoy, to play the tennis, but actually part of that enjoyment is getting a little bit better, maybe winning or whatever, but there's a sort of just how you get that into the game, really, isn't it? Because it's so easy to just sort of lose concentration or not be there or whatever, but then that's part of the fun as well. So.
No, exactly.
It's getting that right balancing act of, like you said, like fundamentally, we play tennis because we want to enjoy tennis, and we play because we like the game. Like some of these sort of things possibly that we sort of talk about, like, is demanding obviously that little bit more focused concentration. Then it can be it's quite mentally tiring to actually sort of put yourself out your comfort zone sort of to do. But then like it's just us sort of like just opening up another like layer of toolboxes that you can like tuck into that can help you sort of move on if you choose to, because it's essentially it's your guys, like every time we teach you something, it's like we can give you all the tools, but it's your choice in how you apply it. We're just giving you a slightly better tool set to understand about how to apply it as well with the psychology.
Yeah, great.
I like the topic. You can see I've sort of
yeah, well done. That's good. Very good.
The best thing is you don't realise that I'm using it on you half the time when I'm coaching.
We do.
All right, maybe it was not that subtle. Well, or you only picked up 10% of what I do, Jill.
True, absolutely. I'm sure.
All right, guys. Well, it'll be last one next week then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Blimey.
Thank you very much.
Good. Well, thank you so much.
Bye.
My pleasure.
Very good. Great.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a
Bye.
lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.